The Judgment Chamber of the Galactic Dominion was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It stretched across 3 kilometers of floating architecture, suspended above the burning surface of a star that had been converted into a power source 10,000 years ago. Crystal pillars rose toward an artificial sky filled with holographic displays showing feeds from 17 conquered galaxies. And seated upon platforms carved from materials that did not exist on Earth, representatives of 912 species watched with cold curiosity as the first human ever permitted in this sacred space walked toward his death. Marcus Cole was not an impressive man. He was 43 years old, gray in his hair, tired in his eyes. He had been a history teacher in Milwaukee before the Dominion arrived. He had spent his career explaining how empires rose and fell to teenagers who cared more about their phones than the lessons of the past. Now he stood at the center of an empire that had conquered more worlds than humanity had ever dreamed existed. And those lessons were the only weapons he had left dot above him. Emperor Vorath the Undying shifted on his throne. The throne was carved from the compressed heart of a collapsed star, and it floated 20 meters above the chamber floor, surrounded by fields of energy that could vaporize anything that came too close. Vorath himself was massive, a mountain of chitinous plates and glowing red eyes that had watched civilizations burn for 3,000 years. His voice, when he spoke, made the air itself tremble with barely contained violence. The human colony on Kepler 442b has violated Dominion law, Vorath announced. Each word echoed through the chamber and across broadcast systems that carried his judgment to trillions of watching beings. The penalty for unauthorized expansion into Dominion space is extinction. The planet designated Earth will be sterilized. All human colony worlds will be harvested for resources. The genetic material of this species will be archived as a historical curiosity. 12 billion people. Gone with a single sentence. The assembled representatives made sounds of approval. Some clicked their mandibles together in what passed for applause among insectoid species. Others released pheromones that translated to satisfaction and amusement. A delegation of crystalline beings pulsed with colors that meant laughter in their visual language. Marcus Cole stood completely still. He had known this moment was coming. He had spent 3 years preparing for it. Every step he had taken since the Dominion first appeared in Earth's sky had led him here. To this chamber, to this judgment, to this precise moment in galactic history. And now that it had arrived, he felt nothing but calm. "You may speak your final words, human," Emperor Vorath said. His 6 crimson eyes focused on Marcus, with the attention a child might give to an interesting insect before crushing it. "We grant you this mercy because your species has provided brief entertainment during its short existence." Laughter rippled through the chamber again. 900 species, amused by the death of 12 billion people. Marcus looked up at the Emperor. His eyes, brown and ordinary, and completely human, met those ancient crimson orbs without flinching. Then he smiled. It was not the smile of a defeated man accepting his fate. It was not the desperate expression of someone hoping for mercy. It was the smile of a predator that had just watched its prey walk into a trap that had been 3 years in the making. "I am not here to beg," Marcus said. His voice carried through the chamber's acoustic systems, calm and clear. "I am here to deliver a message." Vorath's mandibles clicked with irritation. The sound was like bones breaking. "Speak then, insect. Amuse us one final time before your species ceases to exist." Marcus reached into his pocket. Every weapon in the chamber tracked his movement instantly. 12,000 security drones locked onto his position with targeting systems that could reduce him to atoms in a fraction of a second. The Imperial Guard raised barriers of pure energy around the Emperor's throne, ready to protect their master from any conceivable threat. Marcus pulled out a small data chip and held it up for all to see. 3 years ago, he began, when your Dominion first contacted Earth and demanded our unconditional surrender, humanity had a choice. We could fight, which meant instant destruction. We could surrender, which meant slow extinction under your rule. Or we could choose a third option. He held the chip higher. We could play a completely different game. The chamber fell silent. Even the most ancient species, beings who had witnessed the birth and death of stars, found themselves leaning forward with unexpected interest. You see, Your Majesty, humans have a saying that I taught my students many times. If you cannot win the game by the established rules, then change the rules entirely. And if you cannot change the rules ... Marcus smiled wider. Then burn the entire table to the ground and build a new one. He crushed the data chip in his fist. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. The representatives shifted uncomfortably. Emperor Varath's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but not yet alarm. The security systems continued their targeting, but did not fire. Then every light in the judgment chamber went dark. The darkness was absolute. Species that saw in infrared found their vision scrambled. Beings that navigated by echolocation heard only static. Even the Emperor's ancient eyes, which had never failed him in 3,000 years of rule, saw nothing but void. When the lights returned 3 seconds later, the chamber's main display showed something that no being in the history of the Dominion had ever witnessed. Evidence. Documentation. Proof. 300 years of carefully hidden failures. Battles that Vorith had lost and erased from history. Bribes he had accepted from enemies he had publicly sworn to destroy. And most damaging of all, proof that his legendary immortality was a lie, maintained through technology stolen from a species he had claimed to have completely exterminated. The chamber erupted in chaos, but Marcus Cole was not watching the chaos. He was walking forward, toward the Emperor's throne, toward the being who had just sentenced his entire species to death. The gravity beneath his feet shifted and twisted as coalition agents activated systems they had spent 3 centuries infiltrating. The Imperial Guard found themselves pinned to the floor by forces their bodies could not resist. And Emperor Vorith, for the first time in 3,000 years, fell. His throne dropped. His massive body tumbled forward. And the most powerful being in 17 galaxies crashed to the floor at the feet of a former history teacher from Milwaukee. Marcus looked down at him. You wanted to know what humans are capable of, he said quietly. Now you will learn. He grabbed the Emperor's face and smashed it into the floor. Sound echoed across 17 galaxies. Nothing in the universe would ever be the same. 3 years before the lights went. Dark in the judgment chamber. Marcus Cole was grading history essays in his small apartment in Milwaukee. The television played news coverage of the Dominion fleet that had appeared in Earth's orbit 12 hours earlier. 17,000 warships, each one larger than a city, hung in the sky like a promise of extinction. The governments of Earth had debated for 3 days before accepting the inevitable. Humanity could not fight. The Dominion's weapons could sterilize continents from orbit. Their shields could withstand anything Earth's militaries possessed. Their technology was so far beyond human understanding that resistance was not just futile, but meaningless. Surrender was announced at 6:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on a Tuesday evening. Marcus watched the announcement with the same detached interest he brought to studying ancient history. He had spent his entire career teaching students about the fall of empires, about the moments when overwhelming force met stubborn resistance, and stubborn resistance lost. He had always wondered what it felt like to live through such a moment. Now he knew. It felt strangely empty. The Dominion's occupation was surprisingly gentle at first. They did not destroy cities or exterminate populations. They simply took control. Human governments continued to function, but they answered to Dominion administrators. Human businesses continued to operate, but they produced what the Dominion demanded. Human lives continued, but they now served purposes that humans had not chosen. Marcus was classified as a Category 7 intellect, useful for administrative work, but too primitive for anything important. He was assigned to a processing center where he helped organize the registration of human populations for labor allocation. It was boring work, but it kept him fed and housed while others were transported to mining colonies on distant worlds. He was walking home from the processing center 3 months after the surrender when the message arrived. His phone buzzed with a notification that should have been impossible. The Dominion controlled all communications on Earth. Nothing could reach human devices without passing through their monitoring systems. But the message appeared anyway, written in English that felt slightly wrong, as if it had been translated through too many languages. We have observed your species. We have studied your history. We believe you may be useful. If you wish to save your world, proceed to the following coordinates. Tell no one. Come alone. The coordinates pointed to an abandoned warehouse in Chicago, 400 kilometers away. Marcus should have reported the message to his Dominion supervisors. He should have informed the authorities and demonstrated his loyalty to the new order. That was what the training sessions taught humans to do. That was how you survived under occupation. Instead, he deleted the message, called in sick to work the next day, and drove through the night to Chicago. The warehouse was cold and dark, and apparently empty. Marcus stood in the center of the concrete floor, feeling foolish and frightened, wondering if this was some kind of trap designed to identify potential troublemakers for extermination. Then she appeared. She called herself Vex, and she was not like anything Marcus had ever seen. Her form was vaguely humanoid, but her skin shifted colors constantly like oil on water. Her eyes contained no pupils, only swirling galaxies of light that seemed to look through him rather than at him. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes caught in a storm. You came alone, she observed. That is good. It suggests you can follow instructions. Who are you? Marcus asked. His voice was steady, which surprised him. I represent a coalition of species that the Dominion conquered long ago, Vex replied. We have been waiting for centuries for an opportunity to strike back. We have infiltrated their systems, learned their weaknesses, positioned our agents throughout their empire. But we have always lacked one thing. What? A catalyst. Vex moved closer, her shifting form casting strange shadows in the darkness. The Dominion believes it understands every species it has conquered. They have studied us all, cataloged our behaviors, predicted our responses. They know exactly what we will do in any situation, because they have spent centuries learning how we think. She paused, her galaxy eyes focusing on Marcus with uncomfortable intensity. But they do not understand humans. Your species is young, barely a few thousand years old. You have not been observed long enough to be predicted. And your history... She made a sound that might have been laughter. Your history is insane. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? You wage war against yourselves with a creativity that terrifies older civilizations, Vex explained. You develop weapons and then use them on each other. You build empires and then tear them down from within. You resist occupation through methods that no rational species would ever consider because the cost is always too high. We are not always rational, Marcus admitted. Precisely. Vex nodded. That is what makes you dangerous. The Dominion has conquered 10,000 species, and not one of them has ever thought to fight back the way humans do. Not one of them has been willing to sacrifice everything, including themselves, for the mere possibility of victory. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. You want me to sacrifice myself? I want you to choose, Vex corrected. The Coalition has a plan. It will take years to execute. It will require you to leave Earth, to infiltrate the Dominion's highest levels, to become invisible until the moment when everything depends on you. And when that moment comes, you will almost certainly die. But humanity survives? If you succeed, humanity not only survives, but becomes free. The Dominion will collapse. The subject species will rise. And humans will be remembered as the catalyst that changed everything. Marcus thought about his students. He thought about his empty apartment and his empty life and the essays he had been grading when the world ended. He thought about 12 billion people living under occupation, slowly being ground into extinction by an empire that did not even consider them worthy of hatred. What do I have to do? He asked. Vex smiled, and for the first time, Marcus saw something in her alien features that looked almost like hope. First, she said, you need to understand how the Dominion really works. And then you need to learn how to destroy it from within. The training began that night. Over the following weeks, Vex taught Marcus things that no human had ever learned. The structure of Dominion politics, built on alliances of convenience and barely concealed hatreds. The weaknesses of Emperor Vorith, hidden behind 3,000 years of propaganda. A network of coalition agents scattered across 17 galaxies, waiting for a signal that might never come. And most importantly, she taught him how to be invisible. Humans are classified as Category 7, she explained. That means you are considered intelligent enough for manual labor, but too primitive for meaningful resistance. The Dominion does not monitor Category 7 species closely because they do not believe. Category 7 species are capable of complex thought. That is their mistake, Marcus said. Yes, Vex agreed. And you will make them pay for it. 6 months after the surrender, Marcus Cole disappeared from Earth. His official records showed that he had been selected for off-world service, assigned to the Imperial Administrative Corps as a junior archivist. It was a nothing position, a kind of role given to useful but unimportant servants. No one noticed when he left. No one cared where he went, which was exactly what the Coalition wanted. The game had begun. The Imperial archives on Thraxus Prime contained the recorded history of 17 conquered galaxies. Billions of documents spanning millions of years, stored in crystalline matrices that could preserve information until the stars themselves burned out. It was the largest repository of knowledge in existence, and Marcus Cole spent 2 years organizing files in its lowest levels. His job was simple. Documents arrived in disorganized batches from across the Empire. Marcus sorted them, cataloged them, filed them in the appropriate sections. He worked 12-hour shifts alongside other servants from conquered species, beings who had given up on resistance long ago and simply wanted to survive another day. The Dominion guards barely noticed him. He was human, which meant he was barely sentient in their eyes. He followed orders. He kept his head down. He never complained, never asked questions, never did anything that might suggest he was more than a well-trained animal. Meanwhile, he was learning everything. The archives contained more than just historical records. They contained security protocols, guard rotation schedules, technical specifications for systems that had been built when humanity was still living in caves. They contained political correspondence between Dominion officials, revealing alliances and rivalries that the public never saw. And they contained evidence of Emperor Varath's carefully hidden failures. The Coalition had agents in the archives who helped Marcus access restricted sections. They taught him how to move through security checkpoints without triggering alarms. They showed him which documents to copy and which to leave alone. And slowly, over months of careful work, Marcus assembled a collection of evidence that would shake the foundations of the Dominion itself. Varath's immortality was a lie. He had stolen regeneration technology from a species called the Eternal Ones, whom he had supposedly exterminated 2,000 years ago. But a few Eternal Ones had survived, hidden by the Coalition, waiting for the moment when their stolen technology could be used against the Emperor, who had destroyed their civilization. Vorith had lost battles and covered up the defeats. His propaganda claimed an unbroken record of victory spanning 3 millennia, but the truth was more complicated. He had been forced to retreat from entire systems. He had accepted humiliating treaties with enemies he could not defeat. He had hidden these failures behind walls of classification and executed anyone who learned the truth. And Vorith was afraid this was the most valuable discovery of all. The Emperor who presented himself as an immortal god was secretly terrified of assassination. He had survived 17,000 attempts on his life, and each one had made him more paranoid. He trusted no one completely. He saw enemies everywhere, and he maintained his power through a careful balance of fear and favor that could collapse if the right pressure was applied. Marcus filed this information away and continued his work, invisible and patient, waiting for the moment when everything would come together. That moment almost never came because of what happened in the 3rd month of his 2nd year. He was working late in a restricted section of the archives, copying documents that detailed a military defeat Vorith had suffered against a rebellion in the outer systems. The information was exactly what the Coalition needed, proof that the Emperor's power was not as absolute as he claimed. He did not hear her approach. "Those files are classified above your access level," a voice said behind him. Marcus froze. His hand was still on the crystalline storage device, mid-copy, the evidence of his crime perfectly visible. He turned slowly, expecting to see Imperial guards with weapons drawn. Instead, he saw a woman. She was not human, but she was closer to human than most species Marcus had encountered. Her skin was pale silver, almost metallic. Her eyes were solid gold with no visible pupils. Her features were elegant in a way that seemed deliberately designed rather than naturally evolved, and she wore the seal of the Imperial House on her robes. "You should not be here," she said. Her voice was calm, almost curious. "And you definitely should not be copying those documents." Marcus's mind raced through his options. He could try to fight, but she would certainly have guards nearby. He could try to run, but there was nowhere to go. He could try to lie, but she had already seen what he was doing. So he told the truth. "I am trying to save my species," he said simply. The woman tilted her head, studying him with those gold eyes. "Your species is already scheduled for extinction. The trial is in 11 months. Nothing you do here will change that." "Maybe not," Marcus admitted, "but I have to try." She was silent for a long moment. "Ma." Kokos waited for her to call the guards, to end his mission before it could truly begin. The Coalition had always known this was a risk. One wrong move, one moment of bad luck, and everything would collapse. But the guards did not come. "My name is Lyra," the woman said finally. "I am the Emperor's daughter." Marcus felt his blood turn cold. The Emperor's daughter. He had never heard of such a person. Vorith had publicly declared himself beyond mortal concerns like family. An heir would suggest mortality. Mortality would suggest vulnerability. But here she was. "No one knows I exist," Lyra continued, as if reading his thoughts. "My father has kept me hidden my entire life. I am not supposed to matter. I am not supposed to have opinions or desires or purposes beyond whatever role he eventually assigns me. Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked carefully. "Because I am tired of being invisible." Lyra moved closer, her gold eyes reflecting the dim light of the archives. "And because I recognized something in you when I saw you copying those files. The same patience my father has. The same willingness to sacrifice everything for a goal. You are planning something human, something that will hurt him. Marcus said nothing. I am not going to stop you, Lyra said. I am not going to report you. I am going to walk away and pretend this conversation never happened. Why? Lyra smiled, and there was something bitter in the expression. Because I have spent my entire life as a prisoner of my father's paranoia. Because I understand what it means to be trapped by power you cannot fight. And because I want to see what happens when someone finally challenges him. She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. But I want you to remember something, human. When you bring him down, and I believe you will, remember that not everyone in this empire chose to be here. Some of us want to see it fall as much as you do. She disappeared into the shadows. Marcus stood alone in the archives for a long time, thinking about what had just happened. The Emperor's daughter had found him committing treason and had chosen to let him go. She was either an ally he had not expected or a trap he could not see. Either way, his mission had just become far more complicated, but he was too close to stop now. The trial was in 11 months. The Coalition's plan was almost complete. And somewhere in the highest levels of the Dominion, an emperor who thought he was untouchable was about to learn the truth about humanity. Marcus went back to work. The game continued. The human colony on Kepler 442b was never meant to succeed. It was bait, and the Dominion had swallowed it completely. 3 years after the occupation began, humanity received permission to establish a settlement on a marginal world at the edge of explored space. The planet was barely habitable, with thin atmosphere and extreme temperatures that made survival a daily struggle. The Dominion allowed the colony as a gesture of contempt, proof that they could grant humans small freedoms without consequence. The Coalition had different plans. They leaked evidence that the colony contained forbidden technology. They forged documents suggesting that human settlers had been communicating with enemies of the Dominion. They created a scandal significant enough to demand imperial attention, a violation serious enough to require formal judgment in the chamber itself, and they ensured that Marcus Cole would be selected as humanity's representative. The selection process was deliberately designed to humiliate. The Dominion could have chosen any human leader, any diplomat, any figure of authority. Instead, they selected a junior archivist who had no official standing and no political power. They wanted to demonstrate that humanity was so insignificant that its fate could be decided by a servant. They could not have made a better choice. Marcus received the notification 3 months before the trial. He would be transported to the judgment chamber on Thraxis Prime. He would stand before Emperor Voreth and 900 species. He would speak for humanity's survival and almost certainly fail. The Coalition's agents moved into final position. For 300 years, they had been preparing for this moment. They had infiltrated every level of Dominion society, from the lowest maintenance workers to the highest military commanders. They had placed agents in communications networks, security systems, and power distribution grids. They had built backdoors into technology so old that no one remembered how it worked, and they had waited for someone to light the match. Marcus spent his final weeks on Thraxis Prime, meeting with Coalition contacts in secret. They gave him the data chip that would trigger the system blackout. They explained exactly what would happen when the lights went dark. They told him what he needed to do in the 90 seconds of chaos that would follow. The broadcast systems will remain active throughout the blackout, Vex explained during their last meeting. Every species in 17 galaxies will see the evidence we have uploaded. They will see Varaf's failures, his lies, his stolen immortality. And they will see you. What happens after? Marcus asked. That depends on you. Vex's galaxy eyes were unreadable. The evidence will destabilize the Empire, but it will not destroy it. Varav's rivals will see an opportunity to strike, but they will wait to see if he can recover. The subject species will want to rebel, but they will hesitate unless they believe victory is possible. They need a symbol, Marcus understood. They need to see the Emperor fall. Not metaphorically, not politically, physically. Vex leaned closer. They need to see a human bring down a god. Marcus thought about the security systems that protected Vorith, the energy fields that surrounded his throne, the Imperial Guard that had protected him for 3,000 years. How am I supposed to get close enough to touch him? Vex smiled. The Coalition has been infiltrating the Judgment Chamber systems for 3 centuries. When you crush the data chip, you will have control of the gravity generators for exactly 90 seconds. The Emperor's throne will fall. His guards will be pinned. And he will be at your feet, helpless. And after 90 seconds, the backup systems will activate. The guards will recover. And you will almost certainly die. Vex paused. Unless you move very quickly. Marcus nodded slowly. He had known from the beginning that this mission would probably kill him. He had accepted that possibility when he walked into an abandoned warehouse in Chicago 3 years ago. He had made peace with it during 2 years of invisible work in the archives. But now that the moment was approaching, he found himself thinking about things he had not thought about in years. His students back in Milwaukee. The history lessons he had taught about empires that rose and fell. The essays he had been grading when the world ended. He had always told his students that history was shaped by ordinary people in extraordinary moments. He had never imagined that he would become one of those people. There is something else, Vex said. Something the Coalition has been debating for months. What? Lyra, Marcus tensed. He had not spoken about his encounter with the Emperor's daughter. He had not told anyone that she knew about his mission, that she had chosen to let him continue, that she had expressed a desire to see her father fall. We know she found you in the archives, Vex continued. Our agents observed the encounter. What we do not know is why she let you go. She said she was tired of being invisible, Marcus replied carefully. She said she wanted to see what would happen when someone challenged him. Do you believe her? Marcus considered the question. He had thought about Lyra many times since their meeting. He had wondered if she was genuine or if she was playing some game he could not understand. He had considered the possibility that she was a trap, a way for Vorith to identify threats before they could act. But something in her gold eyes had seemed real. Something in her voice had carried the weight of genuine resentment. I believe she hates him, Marcus said finally. And I believe she wants him to fail. That may be useful. Vex nodded thoughtfully. When the Empire falls, there will be chaos. The subject species will need leadership. The power vacuum will need to be filled. Lyra knows how the Dominion works from the inside. She could help build something better. Or she could try to seize power for herself, Marcus pointed out. Yes, that is the risk. Vex's expression was unreadable. But risks are all we have left. The Coalition has been waiting 300 years for this moment. We cannot afford to fail because we were too cautious. The meeting ended with final preparations. Locations to memorize. Timing to perfect. Contingencies to consider. Marcus absorbed everything, filing the information away with the same careful attention he had given to organizing documents in the archives, that the trial was in 3 days, in 3 days. He would stand before the Emperor and 900 species. He would speak humanity's final words. And then he would do something that no being in the history of the Dominion had ever attempted. He would bring down a god. Marcus returned to his quarters and stared at the ceiling until morning. Sleep would not come. Too many possibilities, too many variables, too many ways for everything to go wrong. But one thing was certain. Whatever happened in that chamber, the galaxy would never forget what a single human was capable of. The final act was about to begin. The trial lasted 6 months, Marcus played his role perfectly throughout. He appeared confused and overwhelmed, a primitive human struggling to understand procedures that had been established before his species learned. D to use fire. He made arguments that any competent diplomat would make. Appeals to reason and mercy that the Dominion's judges dismissed with barely concealed contempt. The representatives of 900 species watched with amusement. Some placed bets on how humanity would be executed. Others debated whether the species was even intelligent enough to understand its own extinction. A few expressed mild disappointment that such an entertaining curiosity would soon cease to exist. None of them suspected what was coming. On the final day of the trial, Marcus stood in the center of the judgment chamber as Emperor Vorith pronounced the death sentence. He listened to the laughter of beings who thought they were watching an execution. He felt the weight of trillions of eyes from 17 galaxies, all focused on this moment. And then he smiled. He reached into his pocket. 12,000 security drones tracked his movement. The Imperial Guard raised energy barriers around the Emperor's throne. Every weapon in the chamber locked onto his position. He pulled out a small data chip. 3 years ago, he said, his voice carrying through the acoustic systems, humanity had a choice. Fight and die immediately. Surrender and die slowly. Or play a completely different game. He held up the chip. We chose the third option. He crushed it in his fist. The lights went dark. The blackout lasted exactly 3 seconds. But those 3 seconds changed the course of galactic history. The Coalition's agents had positioned evidence packages on 17,000 servers across the Empire, waiting for this signal. Now that evidence flooded every broadcast system in existence. When the lights returned, the chamber's displays showed Emperor Varath's carefully hidden failures. Battles lost and covered up. Bribes accepted from enemies. And most damaging of all, proof that his immortality was stolen, maintained through technology from a species he had claimed to exterminate. The chamber exploded in chaos. But Marcus was not watching the chaos. He was walking forward toward the Emperor's throne as the gravity generators responded to Coalition control. The floating platform dropped. The energy barriers flickered and died. The Imperial Guard found themselves pinned to the floor by forces their bodies could not resist, and Emperor Vorith, who had ruled for 3,000 years without ever knowing defeat, tumbled from his throne and crashed to the floor at the feet of a human. Marcus stood over him. For a moment, neither of them moved. The Emperor's 6 crimson eyes stared up at the human who had somehow brought him down. His massive form, covered in chitinous plates that had deflected assassination attempts for millennia, lay helpless on the cold floor of his own judgment chamber. "This is impossible," Vorith hissed. His voice, which had made the air tremble minutes ago, now sounded almost frightened. "You are nothing. Your species is nothing. You cannot do this." "And yet here we are," Marcus replied. The Emperor tried to rise. Marcus felt the gravity shifting as Coalition control began to slip. Backup systems were activating. The 90 seconds were running out. Soon the guards would recover. Soon he would be surrounded by enemies. But he had not come this far to fail. "You sentenced 12 billion people to death," Marcus said. "You declared my entire species worthless. You thought we were too primitive to fight back." He grabbed the Emperor by his chitinous face, lifting his massive head with strength that surprised even himself. "You were wrong." And he smashed Varath's face into the floor. The sound echoed through the chamber, through the broadcast systems, through 17 galaxies watching in stunned silence. An emperor brought low by a servant. A god bleeding on his own floor. Marcus smashed his face down again. And again. And again. The emperor who had never known defeat now knew pain. The immortal who had stolen his eternal life now tasted blood. And the being who had sentenced humanity to extinction now lay broken at the feet of a history teacher from Milwaukee. "Humanity does not surrender," Marcus announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the empire. "Humanity does not submit, and humanity does not go quietly into extinction." He released the emperor's head and let it drop. "Remember this moment. Remember what one human was capable of, and understand that there are 12 billion more of us." The chamber was silent, and the chaos began, for Ralph's rivals, seeing weakness, moved immediately. Military commanders who had been promised power by the coalition ordered their fleets to strike. Subject species who had been waiting for centuries rose and coordinated. Rebellion across thousands of worlds. The Dominion, that had stood for 10,000 years, began to crumble in a single. Marcus did not see most of what followed. Coalition agents extracted him from the chamber before the backup systems fully restored. They moved him through hidden passages, onto waiting ships, away from the capital world that was rapidly descending into civil war. 3 months later, he was returned to Earth. The occupation was over. The Dominion forces had withdrawn, needed elsewhere to fight the spreading rebellion. Human governments resumed control, uncertain and afraid, but finally free. Marcus went back to Milwaukee. He went back to his apartment. He went back to teaching history at Jefferson High School, standing in front of students who had no idea that their teacher had changed the course of galactic civilization. But some things could not remain hidden forever. 6 months after his return, a delegation arrived on Earth, not Dominion officials this time, but representatives of the new Galactic Council that was forming from the Empire's ashes. They came not as conquerors, but as supplicants, seeking an alliance with the species that had accomplished the impossible. The leader of the delegation was a woman with silver skin and gold eyes. "Hello, Marcus," Lyra said. "We have much to discuss." She explained what had happened after his departure. The Dominion had collapsed within a year, fractured into competing factions that exhausted themselves fighting each other. The subject species had formed a new coalition, building something that resembled democracy from the ruins of Tiri, and at the center of it all, the memory of what had happened in the Judgment Chamber served as a warning and a promise. "The galaxy remembers," Lyra said. "They remember a human who brought down an emperor with his bare hands. They remember that your species, which everyone underestimated, proved to be the most dangerous force in 17 galaxies." Marcus was silent for a moment. He thought about his students, about the lessons he had taught for years, about the way history was shaped by ordinary people in extraordinary moments. "What do you want from us?" he asked finally. Lyra smiled. "We want you to help us build something better. The old order is gone. The new one is still taking shape. Humanity has earned a seat at the table, Marcus. The question is whether you are ready to take it." Marcus looked out the window of his apartment at the Milwaukee skyline. 3 years ago, he had been grading essays when the world ended. Now he was being asked to help shape the future of galactic civilization. "I think," he said slowly, "we are ready." The galaxy had learned what humanity was capable of. Now it was time to show them what humanity could become.